Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Hi there. Welcome to Blindsight. This is your host, Bill Lundgren, and I'm very happy. Well, let me start off with explaining what we're doing today and for the next several weeks. We're going to talk about feelings. And a lot of people get very nervous about feelings and knowing what it is. And we want to help people to deal with some of that. And I'm very pleased to have Darran Zenger with us today. He was on before, and I certainly was appreciated very much his input then. And the feelings we're talking about as a therapist, I had clients who didn't know of feeling if they fell over it, and which was familiar to me because that's the way my family was. And so I kind of encourage people to start by thinking about what are they feeling right now? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they mad? Or are they scared? And keep it just in those four terms because that makes it simpler for them to pick out something to actually work with. And then that's a way that they can sort of get used to identifying how they are. And today, we're going to talk about all four of those. But today, Darran has been kind enough to join us and talk about happiness, happy, joy, and all of that to begin our talk. So, Darran, thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be back on the podcast. I look forward to this, and I
Great.
appreciate the opportunity to come on again.
So, what are you feeling right now?
Oh, I'm nervous, to be honest. I'm feeling a little anxious.
Scared. Okay.
Well, just because my first experience with the podcast was with you, and we went through the 12 steps, and this is a whole new arena for me. So I
Sure.
self some grace to feel what I'm feeling and know that it's going to be okay.
Sure. Good. Well, the way I would label myself right now is kind of a mixture. I'm kind of mad that I'm having so much trouble with the computer, but boy, am I happy to get you on and be able to actually record this baby.
Yeah.
When we talk about our feelings, one of the things that I've found, and I don't know whether you have, Darran, but it tends to be the men who have the greatest problem with identifying their feelings. But that doesn't, there's some feelings which society doesn't let men have, such as scared, and it doesn't allow women to express anger. In fact, men and women can express the same emotions in the office. And if it comes from a woman, she's judged. And if it's a man, say, well, that's the way he is. Does that sound right to you, Darran?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we got these social constructs for men to only being, we're supposed to be considered tough. We're not considered to be weak. To show emotions is to feel weak. And then the women on the other side, they're more emotional beings, and so they tend to group with their girlfriends to talk about emotions, which they remember things, and which is why if you tie an emotion to an event, women can remember everything. But with men, it's just like we struggle with our emotions, and it's not very often that we tie an emotion to an event unless it's anger, because that's the primary emotion that men often hear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so we're going to talk today about happiness, and how would you define happiness, and how would you define your your degree of happiness, whether shall we say, is made up, because we're kind of, as a society, we're supposed to show a happy face all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people, let me take a step back. Happiness, I believe, is often a choice. And there's a book out there, I can't think of it right off the top of my head, that talks about how we can create happiness in our lives. And happiness is the moment to moment things that we do in our lives. It's these very small gestures we do despite our circumstances. We can find happiness in everything, and I think sometimes we forget that even though we might be in a situation, let's say, for example, for me, being blind, I can create happiness in being present and
Yep.
being with
Hmm.
my kids, being with my family. I mean, it's easy for me to be angry and to be upset and to be sad, but the reality is it takes more energy to create those emotions than it is to be happy, which is I thought was very interesting in my studies as I became a therapist.
Hmm. That's an interesting statement you just made. I remember uh, attending a lecture by an actress named Helen Hayes, and she talked about her first role as Pollyanna. This was back in 1912, I think it was. And a memorable line she quoted was, "Oh, I'm happy that my legs are broken,"
Hmm.
which of course made everybody laugh. But sometimes that's what, there's genuine happiness, but there's also kind of like, you're supposed to show a happy face.
Hmm.
And how do we distinguish? How do we help people to distinguish between the two and be true with their emotions?
I think, to show on a happy face, I think, yeah, a lot of times in my practice, we use the term fake it until you make it. And, there's different things that we can do. And part of this is taking a step back and looking at the gratitude. What do we do have in our life? What
Good
are
point.
things that are positive about us? And so sometimes I'll give people an assignment to do positive affirmations, keep them positive affirmation journal, just 5 different things every day. It could be,
To themselves or to other people.
yes, exactly. And I remember one of my good friends, um, she was challenging me. She said, Darren, I want you to think about, can identify 10 things you enjoy in life. I couldn't even come up with 3.
Mm,
And I had to, because I was overthinking this. And so I had to redefine what brings me happiness. And so I broke it down to the little things that I do enjoy.
okay.
This was easy for me to do. And in that moment was, hey, I enjoy eating French fries from McDonald's because they taste so good and they're very addicting. And then I had to expand on that. I enjoy drinking Mountain Dew at a certain gas station because their fountain ratio is awesome. I enjoy drinking a Coke from McDonald's because you just don't get a better Coke unless you go to McDonald's. And so I had to start redefining what are those things that bring enjoyment to me. And so once I started shifting my perspective to that, then I realized, oh, there's a whole bunch of things in my life that I'm happy about.
Oh, I see. So how are you distinguishing, is it things that bring you joy, and that comes to happiness is the feeling you get from those things? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, exactly. Because we have to start with the things that we do like. And so sometimes in a positive affirmation, I have to reframe some things. When I was dating, I always had this narrative that a girl turned me down because I was blind.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really lead to disappointment, sadness, and anger. But I
Right.
reframe that challenge because my roommate at that time says, Darren, you have a lot of attributes and characteristics that women die to have.
Right.
So I had to look at what my friend was trying to tell me And then I had to reframe that and say, well, that sucks. She doesn't want to go on a date with me. But I also had to say, you know what? That's on her because she didn't get to see who I am as a whole.
Ah, there you go. And so in that, you can then allow yourself to actually, in a way, say, I'm happy if she's not able to see the good parts. I don't want any parts of her.
Mhm. Exactly.
I can go. I'm freed up to talk to someone else or work with someone else, and who would appreciate me.
Exactly. And it was my roommate who loved me enough. And I had to take a step back and realize, where am I with loving myself and being okay with my own personal limitations? I can't
Right.
control that, which ties into the serenity prayer, you know, surrender to the things that we can't control and know the wisdom to know the difference. And
Right.
as I can't change this, but what I can choose is change my perspective, because my perspective is my reality, but perhaps my perspective is off.
Well, I think that's one of the really difficult things with people with any kind of physical disability. We focus on the disability and forget that is only a part of who we are.
Exactly, because I'm blind, but that doesn't define who I am, just like I have dark hair. That doesn't define who I am. It's a part of me, but it's a very small part of me
Yeah,
that,
I'm more than that.
yeah,
But you know, that's where we get into feeling bad about ourselves when we can move it to, well, look at all the things I can do, or all the thing that I can do to work around my blindness to be able to achieve what I want.
exactly. And that's what I had to do before, just to remind people, I have Usher syndrome. I have blindness due to retinitis pigmentosa, and I'm also deaf. And so I had to wait to the time for me to get my cochlear implants to overcome my inability to hear because I was deaf,
Right.
and go back to graduate school and become a licensed clinical social worker where I work today. And my people that I work with, my colleagues, they don't see that different from me. They just say, "Hey, Darran, what can I do to support you? What kind of support do you need so that you can still do your job?"
Right. Exactly. And that builds bonds with other people, which is what we need.
Exactly.
When we're perfect, nobody's going to come close to us. But because we have a disability, and we have to get off our high horse and ask for some assistance, but then we get to know the person better, and the person gets to know us better.
Mhm.
So in the end, we both win. We both become happy with the experience.
Exactly. And that kind of reminds me of the research that Dr. Brene Brown did, and talking about we are wired for connection. We're interdependent as social beings. And that sense of community and connectiveness and belonging will make the world of difference. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. So the happiness in a sense is not changing something in terms of our physical being, but just being who we are and being comfortable with it.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And that's what I work with my clients. They're recovering from addictions. And so the opposite of addiction is connection. And I remind
Ah,
that their addiction doesn't have to define who they are, and they have to learn to be okay with where they're at in their journey, because a lot of times there's this expectation to be perfect, like you just talked about, but willing to trust the process and learn to live in the moment, and these little moment by moment things is what creates the happiness.
mm-hmm. And it's not anything, sometimes people a drink, for example, in order to, quote, feel happy. And all it's doing is anesthetizing the part of us that we need to work on.
Exactly. Or they're feeling uncomfortable by feeling emotions of sadness, depression.
Right.
They do that to numb that out, which is ironic. There's, our bodies and our brain doesn't differentiate the difference between positive emotions and negative emotions. It's more related to comfortable emotions versus uncomfortable emotions.
There you go. And happiness is not an uncomfortable emotion, but we're not even familiar sometimes with what it is, what it feels like.
Exactly. And a lot of people in addiction, I'm coming from that part. I mean, being happy can be an uncomfortable position and emotion for them because they've never really experienced it for a long time, that they forgot what it feels like. And so they fall back.
And sometimes we don't even know we deserve it.
Exactly. And so, part of the happiness again is challenging those negative self-talks and recognize, hey, I have some internal value, and we can't rely upon others to validate ourselves. We got to do that. That's internal work that needs to happen. And because then we can shift and be able to connect with others.
Where did joy come in?
Joy comes in with, that's more in terms of a long-term type of approach. So happiness is this day-to-day moment stuff. But joy comes in with pleasure, with events that take over time. For me, how I define joy is, what is it that I'm doing that I can give to other people and enjoy that relationship in a terms of over time. I mean, I can be happy everything day to day. I can go on trips and be with my family and experience joy because my intention with being with my family is to be with them and be happy. So joy is can be looked at as an accumulation of all these little happy things we do every day, whereas joy is something that takes over time.
Well, I like to hike. But of course, I don't want to hike alone. But I get a chance to get a few people together and go on a hike, and also have the experience of my dog taking care of me. There's happiness there, but at the completion of the hike, I feel joy.
Exactly. So it's at that completion piece, when I come to full circle, having kids, grandkids,
Right.
seeing how my kids are being successful, I can
Yep.
enjoy that my family, just like you said, at that completion. See, I like to hunt, so I enjoy and be happy being out in the woods, but that joy comes in place at the completion of a successful hunt. And even if I'm not successful at my hunt, I still have joy because I'm out doing something that I get a lot of happiness just being out in nature.
Right. And it can just be there. It can be out joy, or it can be just a satisfaction. And you say happiness.
Exactly.
I'm doing it. So there's a continuum there. And you talk about joy as a completion, but the happiness is in the process of getting to joy.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So when people are walking around with what we call a very long face and they're extremely unhappy, what do they need to do? I mean, one of the things you said was certainly take a look at yourself and ask yourself if you're judging yourself by one thing rather than looking at the whole part of you. I believe that's a summation of what you said, or there's some other things people need to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think, if we're, sometimes, there's that true piece of chemical imbalance, and, that's
Right. Yeah.
be a
Mm-hmm.
real thing. And so seeing a medical provider who's competent in dealing with depression and finding, something that could happen with that, to help balance that out. And,
Right.
sometimes we do need that. Because what's happening is we're in this constant state where cortisol is being released and we don't know how to shut it off sometimes. And this is true for anxiety as well. And so sometimes taking medication can help us kind of deal with this because of our, circumstances that we're in. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
case where, what are the negative thoughts that are plaguing you, maybe some of this stuff,
Right. Mm-hmm.
for me is more of a grieving process. When I had to give up the keys to drive, I always thought myself that, I can think my way through this.
Right. Right.
And then, years later, 18 years later, I just into a ton of bricks that knocked me off my seat and realized I was just suppressing that sadness, that I never really processed that emotion. And I had to go through a grieving process to come to terms with it's still okay to feel depressed and sad because I didn't give myself that honor to properly grieve the process of letting go of driving because, our society takes pride in independence,
Independence. Right.
and things like this. And for blind people who have to give that up, that can be really, really difficult and challenging to transition from this pride and joy and feeling like they have to depend on others.
Well, I think you're making up an important point that, you know, some people think they're supposed to stay in one state, let's say a happiness state all the time. But it is neither bad nor good
Mm-hmm.
that we have any of those four emotions. None of them are to be judged in a negative way or in a positive way. They're just feelings that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to own up to them. I had a situation this morning, which made me think, oh, it was a good topic for talking today. I was clearing out the dishwasher, and I live alone, so I was putting the dishes away. And I have a cupboard with, the breakable china in it, and I had cups in there, and I was moving one of them to make room for something else, and all of a sudden I heard something leave the cupboard and land on the floor, and of course I was angry at myself, and I was sad, and I was scared because I didn't know if it's shattered, how am I going to clean it up? How do I keep the dog out of it so he doesn't hurt himself? And then I realized my brain took over and said, that wasn't it, nothing was broken. It was a tin cup.
Mm-hmm.
And so I then, switched to relief. I guess we would call happiness. Happiness. It was relief that I didn't have all of that. And even with my perverted mind, I was thinking, well, maybe if there's a dent in the tin cup, I could take my dark glasses and my dog and stand out on the street corner with this tin cup and see if I can make some money.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, the that little sarcastic remark, I laughed. And that's part of happiness, is to be able to laugh. I didn't break anything. Nothing got broken.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the whole spectrum of feelings happened in just a few minutes. And that, I think, is important, because we have to own to all of them.
Yeah,
That's why we're going to talk about each of them, to own to, because they're all part of us. And if we block one, we block all of them, I believe.
exactly. That is very true. That's the research with Brene Brown. She talked about if we numb one emotion, we numb them all. And I often use the analogy of my fingers and my thumb. If my fingers and my thumb represent an emotion of anger, sadness, gladness, disappointment, and fear, and I want to run away from these emotions, then that means I'm taking away my fingers and my thumb.
Right.
And how effective is my hand going to work if I don't have those fingers or the thumb?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with the emotions. They just are, and it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel anger. It's
Right.
Anger is an interesting one to deal with. It's often a secondary emotion, and
Right.
often underneath that would be fear or hurt.
Right. And you see, the thing is, we can't deal with life in general unless we're paying attention to our inner selves.
Mhm.
We may have a feeling about being with someone and, like a boss, and be
Mhm.
very angry with them. So what you may do, you can't get angry at your boss, theoretically. So you go home and you get angry at your roommate or the pet or whatever,
Mhm.
but you haven't paid attention to what is it that's bugging you, and is there a way to deal with your anger uh, besides just owning up to it and taking it out on somebody else, a way of being able to deal with the situation that provokes the anger.
Yeah. I mean, you just took words out of my mouth, because I was going to talk about that emotions are information for us.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fact. And we feel things physically, emotionally first, because it's a flush and goes through our body. And then we don't have that time and space to think about what's going on. Just like you said, why is this coming up for me?
Right.
Is it triggering something from my past? And take a step back and objectively look at that. And once we realize what's going on, then we can address what that core issue is, and then be able to, okay, we can work with this.
Right. Or if you say, look, if I'm constantly unhappy with this boss, and I can't do anything about it, then maybe I need to put myself in a more pleasurable position by looking elsewhere for work or whatever is that, there may be some things we can't change, but unless we know what our feeling is, we don't have the incentive to change.
Exactly. And then especially if we don't acknowledge it, then it's hard to make any sort of change.
Yeah. And it comes out, sometimes it has a physical damage on ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. And it's just, that's why awareness of what our emotions are, and our mind is very powerful. The
Mm-hmm.
obsession of the mind is that was what takes over. I mean, we look for things to confirm our biases, and we go look through these narratives based on personal experience, but we're also making assumptions in the process. And so we got to be careful that we can separate what is versus what was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we also, it's always, that's why it was so important for me to ask clients to pay attention what they were feeling at any particular moment, any moment, and identify it, because that's the only way they're going to know what's going on for them.
Yep, exactly.
And then be able and make some decisions as to what to do. And the thing we want to do, of course, I'm not saying that they're equal. I don't want to be equally scared, equally sad, equally. I'd like to have a little more of the happiness,
Mhm.
and we have the power to work on it.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, we get to choose what that is. And like I said, in my very, you know, simple analogy, I had to think of 10 things that I enjoy or I like.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's French fries. I mean, I probably, if I had that all day long, I'd probably be bad for my physical health, but
Yeah, right.
I
But
do enjoy that. I mean, that brings happiness to me because it tastes so good.
yeah, we have a right to put a little happiness in our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as long as it remains in proportion.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think it's also giving ourselves permission to experience happiness, whatever that is. You know, if
Mm,
because if we don't give ourselves permission,
right.
then we're probably have a roadblock here, and this can go any way through this, and be able to take a step back and say, hey, you know what is it that's preventing me from enjoying or
Right. Right.
experiencing
We're
happiness?
we're entitled to that.
Yes,
We
we
have
are.
to give our. Sometimes we feel like we don't deserve it, or we judge what we're doing very negatively. We're like when I give a presentation and I say, "Oh, this was a terrible present," and I beat myself up for days, and then I find out people are asking me to come back. I
Mhm.
say, "What did I put myself through that for?"
Yeah, because we are our worst critics.
Yeah, we are. We are. We
and
are.
and and so sometimes, looking at things from a different lens, from another person's perspective, really helps us. That's great. And so we're comparing ourselves to other people.
Yeah.
Social media, I mean, uh people do that all the time, comparing each other. And so, social media is a high prevalence of depression because we think everybody else has the perfect life, and so
Right.
comparing ourselves to others. And so, finding out why we're experiencing sadness could help us, disconnect from that. For me,
Right.
a lot of my anxiety and depression came from watching the news. I'm a news junkie, but I've also noticed my anxiety and depression started going down when I started disconnecting and just looking at my Apple News app
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
just catching the headlines. And I notice I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't have to dive into this. So that's a way to kind of change some behaviors and taking a step back.
We're talking about looking at ourselves and all four of those things. What's going on? Asking ourselves a question like a friend would say. What's
Exactly.
going on with you right now, Darran? And what are you doing to yourself that you're having this feeling? Can that change? Or maybe that feeling is trying to tell you something.
Exactly.
Great, Darran. Our time's up, unfortunately, but I hope we'll be able to have you back on and to do some more work on this. What you've been saying has been very, very helpful.
It's a pleasure to be back, and I will be back as long as you reach out. I'm happy to come and join you.
Great. Wonderful. That helps me to feel very happy and joy
So
to know that you can do that. So, is there a final thing you want to say to our audience
I,
on the happiness theme?
I think sometimes we, give ourselves a little grace here. We all deserve it, especially to ourselves. And I know it's easier said than done to not be hard
Hmm.
on ourselves, but just give yourself some grace. Reach out to people you trust, and just see what happens. Just talk about them, and see, you know those type of things, the opposite, to dealing with some of these hard emotions of sadness, depression, is connection, and get connected to those things that, that you enjoy doing. It could be anything simple as drinking a soda, making a milkshake, to something as
Right.
having this hike and getting at the top of the hike and completing it. So,
Yeah. And saying something
self-
kind to another person and make them feel good.
exactly.
And, our audience can make us happy by giving us some feedback about our programs or present some ideas. And if you want to give some feedback to us here, there's a feedback at aftersight.org is the email address. Feedback line is 720-712-8856, and to leave a message and let us know. Darran, thank you very much for being here today, and look forward to the next opportunity to talk more.